Here's a truth that no one seems ready to confront. The Boston Celtics' stacked roster is more of a double-edged sword than a surefire ticket to an NBA championship. The team is loaded with talent, but depth, as it turns out, isn't always the blessing it's made out to be. While the basketball world continues to fawn over the Celtics lineup, claiming they have an embarrassment of riches, there's an uncomfortable reality hiding behind the hype. The sheer volume of players in this rotation could be holding the team back, not propelling them forward. Let's talk about it. This roster is top-heavy with talent, no doubt. But here's the problem. With so many capable guards, all vying for the same precious minutes, the Celtics are facing the very real possibility of creating a locker room full of frustration rather than celebration. Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Peyton Pritchard have all proven they deserve their spots on the court. But throw a guy like Josh Richardson into the mix, and what do you have? A logjam. Not just any logjam, but a competitive, potentially toxic one, as players try to claw their way into the rotation. It's easy to sit here and think, why not add more depth? The problem is, depth can only be a blessing if there's a clear path for everyone to play a meaningful role. The Celtics already have so many players capable of filling in, so why risk the chemistry of the locker room by adding someone who might not even make it into the rotation consistently? In a league where minutes are precious, trying to fit another body into a system that already works might be a step backward. Instead of welcoming a veteran guard like Richardson, who has seen his fair share of injury struggles and could be stuck in an awkward role, the Celtics' best move might be to stick with their core group, letting the existing players settle into their rhythm. Why mess it with a formula that's working? The Celtics roster looks like a shiny new car on the lot. But the question is, does it drive smoothly? The answer, unfortunately, isn't as simple as saying they have so many talented players. They're bound to win. If you dig deeper, you'll realize that depth can quickly turn into confusion and indecision. Championship-caliber teams don't simply thrive on the idea of having a deep roster. They thrive on having balance, cohesion, and a clear understanding of each player's role. And right now, the Celtics have too many players who may be in the mix but aren't necessarily in sync. The depth is starting to look less like a blessing and more like a heavy anchor, dragging them down when it should be lifting them up. Let's not sugarcoat it. The Celtics still have some glaring issues with chemistry. Despite having what should be a dominant squad, they haven't yet gelled the way they should. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't make that talent fit together seamlessly, it won't matter in the playoffs. Look back at past champions. Most of them weren't simply stacked with talent. They had star players who knew their roles, and role players who embraced their place in the pecking order. They didn't have too many cooks in the kitchen, each fighting for a chance to show off their skills. Let's be honest here, the Celtics aren't struggling because they don't have the right players. They're struggling because at the end of the day, they don't know exactly what they want to be as a team. Adding more depth isn't going to fix this. It's only going to exacerbate the issue. What the Celtics really need is to focus on streamlining their roster, cutting out distractions, and allowing their core players to thrive without constantly worrying about who's on the bench and who isn't. This is the problem with building a team based solely on the idea of depth. Sure, depth can be a lifesaver when injuries hit, but the Celtics' primary concern should be building a team that is locked in on the same goals, with players who have clearly defined roles. When you have too many players fighting for minutes, you risk losing that focus. You risk turning your well-oiled machine into a chaotic mess where no one knows their place. And the harsh reality, the Celtics have not proven they are capable of maximizing this depth. Despite all the talent, the team has failed to win a championship, and they're still struggling to find the magic formula. Adding Richardson into this mix could very well be the final straw that throws the Celtics' delicate balance into chaos. Instead of bringing in another veteran guard who will need time to get adjusted, it might be smarter for Boston to consolidate their resources and focus on playing the players who already know how to make the system work. Let's get one thing clear. The Boston Celtics are not in need of another guard. The team is already stocked with a plethora of talent at the position. Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Peyton Pritchard are all capable of logging heavy minutes and making meaningful contributions. So, why even entertain the idea of bringing in Josh Richardson, a player who, while once a solid contributor, is now at best a question mark due to age, injuries, and declining performance? Let's unpack this situation, because on paper, the addition of Richardson is looking less like a smart move and more like a potential mistake. First, let's look at the reality of the Celtics' current roster. Boston has one of the deepest guard rotations in the league. White, Brown, and Holiday have locked down their spots in the starting lineup, while Peyton Pritchard, the backup point guard, has proven himself as a reliable contributor when needed. Add Richardson into the mix, and suddenly you have a crowded, log-jammed backcourt where playing time becomes a zero-sum game. This is a team with already established roles and an ongoing rhythm. Bringing in another player who would need to carve out a niche for himself could disrupt the cohesion that has helped make the Celtics one of the top teams in the league. Chemistry is everything in the NBA, and while the Celtics have been playing, well, the last thing they need is to throw a wrench in that delicate balance. Adding a player like Richardson into the mix could disrupt the flow of an already finely tuned system. With players like White, Brown, and Holiday, all capable of playing multiple roles, where exactly would Richardson fit in? Would he accept a reduced role, knowing he would likely be relegated to garbage time minutes or mop-up duty? Given his age, injury history, and inconsistent play in recent seasons, it's highly unlikely he would come in and immediately provide the impact that the Celtics need in a crucial playoff run. Instead, he would simply be another body in an already overstuffed rotation, which does more harm than good. And this is the crux of the problem. Richardson would be taking up space that could be better used by someone already familiar with the Jordan system. Pritchard, despite being younger and less experienced than Richardson, is far more suited to step into a backup role and provide the kind of energy the Celtics need. He knows his place in the rotation, and his shooting, ball handling, and defense have improved significantly. In contrast, Richardson's recent years have been marred by injuries and inconsistent play. Even if he manages to stay healthy, what tangible impact can he offer to a team already loaded with versatile guards who have been contributing effectively? There's no doubt that Richardson brings a wealth of experience to the table, and that's something that could be valuable to many teams in a playoff push. But for the Celtics, a team with championship aspirations, experience alone is not enough. If they were desperate for a veteran presence who could stabilize the team during the postseason, sure, Richardson could fill that role. But the Celtics aren't in a position where they need to plug any major holes. They've been one of the deepest teams in the league all season, and their biggest obstacle isn't a lack of depth. It's making sure their existing players stay healthy, continue to gel, and make smart decisions down the stretch. Even if you were to ignore the crowded rotation, there's the simple fact that Richardson is no longer the player he once was. Injuries have taken their toll, and this season he has only managed to play in 8 games. This is a major red flag. If the Celtics are going to add anyone to their already stacked roster, they need to make sure that player is going to be available, healthy, and ready to contribute when the games matter most. Richardson, with his injury history, might not be able to give the Celtics the depth they need at a crucial time. Would he be healthy enough to play meaningful minutes in the playoffs? Would his body hold up under the intensity of the postseason grind? These are serious questions that the Celtics would be wise to consider before making a move for Richardson. Furthermore, let's not forget that the Celtics aren't just looking for bodies. They need players who can perform when called upon. Richardson may have been solid in his prime, but his production has significantly dropped off in recent years. Last season, he averaged just 9.9 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 2.4 assists, while shooting under 35% from three-point range. This isn't the kind of production you need from a player looking to make a real impact on a championship-contending team. The buyout market is a double-edged sword for NBA teams, and the Boston Celtics are on the brink of discovering that firsthand if they fall into the trap of chasing names like Josh Richardson. The idea behind pursuing a player like Richardson is tempting, given his experience and the fact that he's been a solid contributor in the past. On paper, he's an attractive option, a veteran guard who could provide depth and maybe even a few meaningful minutes off the bench. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Let's not romanticize the buyout market. It's not a treasure chest of untapped talent waiting to be unleashed. It's a graveyard for washed-up players hoping for one more shot at glory. The Celtics need to face an uncomfortable truth here. Richardson represents a risk, not a savior. His injury history, combined with his lack of recent production, raises serious questions about whether he can truly contribute to a team that's already a legitimate championship contender. The Celtics roster is brimming with talent, and unless they encounter a major injury crisis, adding Richardson could simply be a luxury they don't need. The Celtics are operating in a precarious position right now. If they add another player to the mix who doesn't fit seamlessly into their existing structure, they risk disrupting their current momentum and chemistry. The Celtics' depth is often touted as one of their greatest strengths. However, the notion of depth can be highly overrated when you're talking about players who may not be able to contribute at the level you need them to. The Celtics already have a loaded backcourt with the likes of Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Peyton Pritchard. These players have earned their spots in the rotation, and they have developed a rhythm together that has been crucial to the team's success. Adding another player like Richardson, who is at best a role player at this point in his career, could muddy the waters and complicate what's been working so well. We're talking about a team that has a strong, stable rotation in place. Why risk introducing an unpredictable variable like Richardson? The Celtics' biggest problem is not a lack of talent. It's the danger of overcomplicating things and messing up their current momentum by adding someone who doesn't fit the mold. Richardson's skill set is outdated for the kind of dynamic, high-octane play Boston has been known for, and inserting him into the mix could lead to more issues than it resolves. This isn't a case of more is better. The Celtics need to focus on their strengths, trust in their established players, and avoid the temptation to constantly tinker with a roster that's already in a good place. In fact, the biggest pitfall the Celtics face right now is the temptation to chase after quick fixes. Teams that get caught up in the buyout market frenzy often do so in an effort to plug perceived holes that might not actually exist. Sure, Richardson could provide some bench scoring or veteran leadership, but the Celtics' needs are far more complex than what he can offer. Instead of trying to shoehorn another player into an already crowded rotation, the Celtics should focus on building on the strengths they already have, fine-tuning their system, and creating a coherent, harmonious group. Adding Richardson to that mix could be nothing more than a distraction that diverts attention away from what truly matters: chemistry, cohesion, and clarity of roles. Let's break it down. The Celtics have a very clear strength right now: guard depth. Derek White has been playing at an all-star level. Jaylen Brown is one of the best two-way players in the league, and Drew Holiday brings championship pedigree and defensive prowess. Peyton Pritchard has also stepped up, showing he's capable of contributing when needed. The Celtics do not need another guard to add to the mix. They need to focus on maximizing the potential of the players they already have. Adding a veteran like Richardson could cause more harm than good. While he's had a solid career, his best days are behind him. The Celtics would be taking a significant risk by bringing him in. What if he takes minutes away from a younger, more productive player like Pritchard, or messes with the established roles of the team's top guards? What happens if Richardson's injuries flare up again, leaving Boston with an empty roster spot at a critical point in the season? There are just too many uncertainties surrounding his health, his fit within the system, and his role on the team. In a year where the Celtics are gunning for a championship, they can't afford to gamble on a player who may not even make it through the season healthy, let alone provide meaningful playoff minutes. There's no denying that the Boston Celtics have one of the most talented and deepest rosters in the entire NBA. The team is stacked with players at nearly every position, from all-star caliber performers like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown to high-quality role players like Derek White, Marcus Smart, and Peyton Pritchard. Yet the more you look at it, the more you start to question whether this so-called depth is actually a blessing or a curse. It's the age-old dilemma of having too much of a good thing. Depth can be an incredible asset, but it can also be a double-edged sword. Could all this talent eventually spiral out of control, creating locker room drama and disrupting the team's chemistry? At first glance, Boston's depth appears to be the perfect setup for success. The Celtics can roll out multiple lineups, rest key players without missing a beat, and essentially have a next man up mentality if someone gets injured. However, when you look closer, it's hard to ignore the growing tension created by the sheer number of capable players vying for playing time. This is a team where nearly every player believes they deserve minutes, and as the games get more important, the stakes rise. In this kind of environment, the competition for minutes could become a breeding ground for frustration. Derek White, Marcus Smart, and Peyton Pritchard all play in the backcourt, but they each offer something unique. White and Smart, as starting caliber players, have the lock on most of the important minutes, while Pritchard has carved out a role as a reliable backup. But where does that leave someone like Malcolm Brogdon, a player who just a year ago was one of the most efficient guards in the league? Brogdon's versatility is valuable, but it doesn't change the fact that Boston's guard rotation is now crowded to the point of suffocation. Throw in a possible signing of Josh Richardson, and suddenly you have too many mouths to feed. When players don't get the minutes they think they deserve, resentment and jealousy can build up fast. This isn't just about a few disgruntled bench warmers. When players who are used to being starters are relegated to the bench or only get limited minutes, their dissatisfaction can seep into the locker room, affecting team morale. The Celtics might have the depth, but at what cost? If every player feels like they're in a constant battle for minutes, the harmonious team chemistry that they've worked so hard to build could quickly start to unravel. Depth can only work if the chemistry is right, and that's where the Celtics could run into trouble. On the surface, it seems like a good problem to have. A lot of talented players fighting for a chance to contribute, but too much depth can create internal strife, particularly if players start to feel that the coaches or front office are not allocating minutes in a fair or balanced way. If players start to question why certain teammates are getting preferential treatment, or why they're not getting the same opportunities, it could lead to cliques forming within the team, undermining the collective unit. Team chemistry is delicate. The best teams in NBA history don't simply thrive on talent. They excel because each player understands their role, accepts it, and knows that they're working toward the same goal. But what happens when the team has multiple players who all believe they should be in the starting lineup? What happens when stars like Tatum and Brown start getting more focused on their individual success because they're surrounded by so much talent that it's hard to maintain an identity? The Celtics have so many capable players that they risk becoming a team of egos, rather than one unified group with a common mission. Additionally, there's the potential for unhealthy competition. It's not just about finding the right roles, but also about managing the personalities in the locker room. With so many high-caliber players, how do the Celtics avoid tension that arises from one player thinking they deserve more minutes than another? This is especially true in a high-pressure, high-stakes environment like the NBA, where each game feels like it could make or break a player's career. There is only so much room to go around, and if the minutes don't align with expectations, the fallout could be significant. The Celtics' depth also raises another critical question. Do all these players actually know their roles? Depth can only work if everyone understands their purpose within the system. When the roster is stacked, players need to accept that not everyone can be the star. But in a scenario where the Celtics are deep at every position, how do you ensure that everyone is clear on their job, and more importantly, that they buy into that role? In the NBA, even players with the best intentions can fall into the trap of trying to do too much if they feel like they aren't getting enough minutes. For instance, if someone like Peyton Pritchard feels like he's getting left behind in the rotation, does that cause him to start forcing plays or trying to make highlight reel plays to get noticed? Conversely, if Brogdon is relegated to a backup role after being an integral part of the rotation last season, will he become disgruntled and start questioning his future with the team? These are real concerns for Boston, especially as the season drags on and the pressure mounts. This is where the coach's ability to manage personalities and instill a sense of trust is critical. Brad Stevens, or whoever is at the helm, has to ensure that every player feels valued, regardless of whether they're getting the minutes they want. There needs to be a clear understanding that the team's success is far more important than individual recognition. But managing all those egos isn't easy, and if players don't buy into their roles, it could lead to locker room issues that disrupt the Celtics' chances at a deep playoff run. One of the biggest risks of a team with too much depth is the potential to become complacent. With so many players capable of stepping up, it's easy to forget that the team's ultimate goal is cohesion and execution, not just raw talent. Depth is useful in the regular season, but come playoff time, the game changes. It's no longer about who has the most capable bench. It's about who can execute in crunch time. Having a deep roster could lead to over-reliance on fresh legs or individual brilliance, instead of focusing on creating the best team chemistry possible. This is especially true in situations where the Celtics might have to trim their rotation down, relying on a smaller core of players. Too much depth might even create confusion over who should be the go-to guy in key moments. The Boston Celtics have long been seen as one of the most formidable teams in the NBA, with a roster full of depth, talent, and championship potential. Yet, despite their undeniable strength, there's a looming question. Will their obsession with the buyout market lead them to make a rash move they'll regret? The buyout market can be a tempting place for contenders looking to add that final piece to their puzzle, but history has shown that jumping at the chance to sign a veteran on the market can sometimes backfire. With a roster already teeming with talent, will the Celtics resist the urge to make a move, or will they throw caution to the wind, chasing a quick fix? Let's start by acknowledging the temptation of the buyout market. It's the quick fix solution, the opportunity to add a player who could potentially contribute right away without the long-term commitment or trade assets. The Celtics, like many other contenders, are looking for a player who can contribute immediately, whether it's someone to bolster the bench or provide an experienced presence in the locker room. But is this really the solution for Boston, a team already packed with depth at every position? The truth is, the buyout market is often a mirage of instant gratification. For every player who steps in and provides a meaningful contribution to a championship contender, there are several who quickly fade into obscurity or fail to live up to the hype. This is a market filled with players who were deemed expendable by their previous teams for a reason. These veterans, often over the hill or plagued by injury, may have had successful careers in the past, but the reality is that they're no longer the player they once were. A team like the Celtics, already brimming with talent, should be cautious of falling for the allure of these name players who are more likely to be a band-aid than a permanent solution. Josh Richardson, for instance, has been linked with the Celtics as a possible buyout addition. Sure, Richardson has shown flashes of being a solid rotation player in the past, but after an injury-plagued 2024-25 season, he's a far cry from the player he once was. Signing Richardson may seem like a harmless move, but could he really make a meaningful impact for the Celtics? Is he the missing piece that will push them over the top, or will he simply add to the growing pile of underperforming veterans on the bench? In many ways, the Celtics' obsession with the buyout market feels like a misplaced effort to fix something that isn't broken. Boston already has one of the most complete and balanced rosters in the NBA, with an abundance of talent at almost every position. There's no glaring weakness that requires a mid-season addition. Sure, there are always areas where you can improve, but is the answer really going to be found by signing another veteran who will likely take up space and contribute little? The Celtics should resist the urge to make a move simply for the sake of making one. Sometimes, the best decision is the one where you stand pat and trust in the players who have already proven their worth. Adding another player to the mix could end up being more detrimental than beneficial. With so much talent already on the roster, the Celtics face the risk of disrupting their already delicate chemistry. The team has found a rhythm with their current lineup, and their success has come from a combination of role players accepting their roles and stars like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown leading the charge. A new addition, especially someone who is expecting significant minutes, could throw off the balance and upset the dynamic that has worked so well so far. Look at what happened with the Brooklyn Nets last season, a team that was arguably the most talented on paper, featuring superstars like Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving, was plagued by issues of chemistry and fit despite their star-studded roster. Adding another big-name player did nothing to help their cause. Instead, it created a locker room of egos and a team that couldn't seem to find any cohesiveness. The Celtics should learn from that situation. Their strength lies not in having a roster full of stars, but in the way the current roster works together. A player like Richardson may end up causing more issues than he solves. His role would need to be defined carefully, but it's unclear where he would fit without messing up the natural flow of the team. In fact, if the Celtics were to make a move for Richardson, or any other buyout player for that matter, it would likely signal an unhealthy desperation. The team's front office should be focused on the long-term goals of the franchise: stability, cohesion, and ensuring that all players understand their role, rather than chasing after an external piece that may or may not contribute. The buyout market is full of short-term fixes, but the Celtics need to be thinking about the long haul, especially as the postseason approaches. Adding a player like Richardson could create unnecessary drama in the locker room, potentially leading to a scenario where players feel entitled to minutes they don't deserve, or are left unhappy with their reduced roles. It's easy to get swept up in the allure of the buyout market, but the reality is that the Celtics have everything they need right now. Their roster is already one of the deepest in the league, and their focus should be on developing their existing players, reinforcing team chemistry, and executing their game plan, rather than trying to fill a void that doesn't really exist. The Celtics' true strength lies in the cohesion of their core players: Tatum, Brown, Smart, White, and the rest of the rotation. There's a reason why Boston has been one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference for several years running, and it's not just because of their depth. It's because they've developed a system that works, where each player knows their role and can contribute to the team's success without overshadowing one another. Adding a player like Richardson could disrupt that harmony. Instead of chasing after every opportunity that comes along, the Celtics should trust the roster they have. They don't need to add another guard or wing player. What they need is to refine the strengths of their existing group, ensure they stay healthy, and continue to build on the synergy they've established. The best teams in NBA history have thrived because their rosters were both talented and cohesive, not because they added a random buyout player mid-season. The Celtics need to ask themselves, will adding another name truly make them better, or will it just create more problems? Then solutions. Hey Celtics fanatics! What do you think of this news? Leave your opinion in the comments, as it's highly valued.